This video is for those that want to fight. So I'm going to tell a quick tale. It's actually from the 1540s about a samurai and another samurai, a legendary swordsman and a young brash samurai. And in one day in Japan in the 1540s, there was a ferry boat crowded with farmers, merchants, and craftsmen. A young samurai regaled in all who would listen with tales of his great victories as a swordsman, wielding his 3-foot-long sword as he spoke to demonstrate his prowess. The 3 other passengers were a little afraid of this athletic young man, so they feigned interest in his stories to avoid trouble. But one older man sat to the side, ignoring the young bolster. The older man was obviously a samurai himself. He carried 2 swords. But no one knew that this was, in fact, Takashura Budokan, perhaps the greatest swordsman of his time. He was in his 50s by then and liked to travel alone and incognito. Budokan sat with his eyes closed, seemingly deep in meditation. His stillness and silence began to annoy the young samurai, who finally called out, "Don't you like this kind of talk? Don't you even know how to wield a sword, old man, do you?" "I most certainly do," answered Budokan. "My way, however, is not to wield my sword in such inconsequential circumstances as these. A way of using a sword that doesn't use a sword of fighting called? It is called Mutekatsu-ryu, and that means style that wins without swords or fighting." Replied Budokan. "What? Mutekatsu-ryu? Don't be ridiculous. How can you defeat an opponent without fighting?" Now the young samurai was angry and irritated, and demanded that Budokan demonstrate his style, challenging him to a fight then and there. Budokan refused to duel in the crowded boat, but he said he would show the samurai Mutekatsu-ryu at the nearest shore, and asked the ferryman to guide the boat to a tiny nearby island. The young man began to swing his sword to loosen up. Budokan continued to sit with his eyes closed. As they approached the island, the impatient challenger shouted, "Come, you are as good as dead." "I will show you how sharp my sword is." And then he leaped onto the shore. Budokan took his time, further infuriating the young samurai, who began to hurl insults. Budokan finally handed the ferryman his swords, saying, "My style is Mutekatsu-ryu. I have no need for a sword." And with those words, he took the ferryman's long oar and pushed it hard against the shore, sending the boat quickly out into the water and away from the island. The samurai screamed, demanding the boat's return. Budokan shouted back at him, "This is what I called victory without fighting. I dare you to jump into the water and swim here." Now the passengers on the boat could look back at the young samurai receding into the distance, stranded on the island, jumping up and down, flailing his arms, as his cries became fainter and fainter. They began to laugh. Budokan had clearly demonstrated Mutekatsu-ryu. And I believe the interpretation of this tale is any person that desires to win a victory. Victory is not achieved necessarily by fighting. It's not necessarily achieved by direct conflict. There are many ways to win and to possess a strategy that will enable you to win without fighting, that not only eliminates and humiliates your opponent. There can be no greater victory. What would Budokan have risked in a direct confrontation? Well, he probably would have slayed the younger, more arrogant samurai. Or perhaps if he had challenged him initially on the boat, instead of drawing the ire of the young samurai to himself, could have endangered the other passengers. But instead, he strategically analyzed the weaknesses of his opponent, drew on the hubris and arrogance of his opponent, specifically manipulated him into a tactical situation from which he could not win. And I believe as we progress into the future, we need not think of violence. Violence is effective, but violence is not the greatest. It's not the most supreme tool. The most supreme tool is strategy. So anybody listening to this little parable or this little tale, think for a moment that there are 100 men against you and you alone, and you have to win without fighting or surrendering. And if you can answer this question, then you're well on your way to knowing the tactics that will be required to win all battles. That's it for the evening. Love you all.